Hey, what's going on, everybody? This is D back again with MKD58 Media, and I have another movie review for you. And this one's a long time coming because I'm actually a pretty big fan of the original 1992 film. Of course, I'm talking about Candyman. But to be more specific, I'm talking, of course, about the new 2021 Candyman. Ooh, I already said it twice. Okay, gotta be careful there. The new one, which was directed by dacosta and produced by Jordan Peele, and is starring Yahya Abdul-Mateen II. Vanessa Williams is also, returning from the 92 original, and she looks basically the same. Like, she really hasn't aged at all. And it is also starring, I want to make sure I get these other names in here, Tiana Paris, Nathan Stewart Jarrett, Coleman Domingo, and Kyle Kaminsky. So I just watched this 2 nights ago, and I know I'm very, very late to the party with watching this film. Everybody else has already checked it out and kind of formed their opinions about the movie, much of which, or at least a few of which I've heard and read, and kind of some stuff I heard and was kind of like, oh, I don't know if I'm gonna like this one. But I've also seen, obviously, a lot of people did like this film. But yeah, I did hear some things that led me to believe I might not really like this movie. And I also just saw a few things in the trailer that led me to believe I might have a few issues with this film. But yeah, so I watched it 2 nights ago, and the general setup for this film, Yahya Abdul-Mateen II plays Anthony, who is an artist, and one night, his girl's brother, and the brother's partner are hanging out, just like having drinks and dinner at an apartment. And the brother starts to tell kind of ghost stories about the legend of Candyman. And Anthony, I guess this was his first time even hearing about this legend and these stories and this lore. So he becomes very kind of intrigued by the legend and the idea after hearing these stories. And so he actually begins to dig and investigate into the story and the history, and he even goes to what was once the Cabrini Green Projects, but it's now kind of a gentrified area and looks very different than it looked kind of back in 92 or whatever. And so he goes there still kind of poking around, and ends up running into an older gentleman who really kind of starts to break down stuff regarding the man, as it were. So Anthony actually starts to incorporate the stories and the lore and everything into his actual artwork, and actually has a piece that's displayed at an art gallery show where he actually incorporates a real physical mirror and actually invites and encourages viewers of the piece to say the name 5 times. So Anthony's really kind of kicking up a lot of supernatural dust right now, and really kind of stirring up energy that maybe hadn't been really too as active for a few years and everything. And he ultimately, things start to happen. Of course, people start to die. But Anthony also, more specifically, basically starts to go down a path that ultimately leads to what you could consider his true destiny. All right, and that's all I'll really kind of say in terms of the actual kind of plot setup there. Once again, I'll say, if I didn't say it before, this is going to be a spoiler review, so there will be things that I say that qualify as spoilers. I'm not going to, but there's also spoilers that I'm not even going to talk about, because there's some things that maybe didn't interest me or didn't necessarily catch my attention. But this is a spoiler review technically, so you got to keep that in mind. So that's kind of your warning there. But what did I like about this movie? Because I always want to start with the positive before I get into what I really thought about the film. But what I liked about it, positives, this is a pretty good looking film. This is a very kind of slick, good looking film. It looks very fresh out the box, just a very kind of new, good looking movie. The opening credit title sequence, I liked that quite a bit, actually. It was pretty eerie, and it was pretty fitting. It was a very kind of uncomfortable, discombobulating camera angle that they were using, where you're looking up, you're kind of in this inverted type position, and you're looking at skyscrapers kind of scrolling by, engulfed by fog. And it's just a very eerie, fitting viewpoint for this movie. And it actually makes me think to the 92 original. In the opening title credit sequence for the original 92 film, you're looking at it's a bird's eye view, and you're looking down at the urban landscape, looking down at the street and the rooftops of the buildings, and the camera is scrolling over, panning over the city. So in this new film, it's almost kind of like the opposite angle. It's the opposite viewpoint. And I think it's very fitting. I actually really kind of appreciated that, and really felt like, okay, the movie's kind of off to a pretty good start, actually, in terms of just, how I feel about what I'm looking at. So I want to give them props, kudos, whatever, for that, the opening title sequence. It might seem like a small thing, but, it all adds up in the end. So, more positives. The storytelling sequences with the shadow puppets. I liked this. This was, I want to say relatively unique, but there's a lot of movies I haven't seen, so maybe it wasn't. But just for what I've seen, this was pretty unique, in terms of just what I would just visually, it was visually striking, very dynamic. It was spooky. It was eerie. And it was effective, simple, but very effective. And I think part of what was kind of creepy about it was you're using what is generally considered to be a children's medium to tell a very horrific story. So you're using kind of, it's almost like you're essentially using children's toys. I mean, you're using shadow puppets for, you could just pretty much say you're using children's toys to illustrate very violent, horrible happenings. And I think that's always going to be kind of uncomfortable and very kind of ominous. And it works here. The way the puppets have like these cutout eyes that basically look like almost like when you see kind of eyes that don't have pupils, those kind of demonic type eyes that you might see in a comic book or in a movie or whatever like that. So it has that kind of ominous visual impact. I thought the puppet stuff was actually really cool, so credits to them for that. More positives. I thought they actually connected this film to the original, considering what they chose to do. Okay, considering the direction they chose to go in, I thought they actually did a pretty adequate, and for the purposes of this review, adequate is a positive. It is a positive description for the purposes of this review. I thought they did a pretty adequate job in terms of connecting this to the original without basically saying, oh, all the things that happened in the original, forget them. They didn't happen. Don't even worry about it. They didn't do that. The best that this story would allow them to, they kept everything that happened in the original intact, kept that whole story, all of the things that happened in the original movie. In this new movie, they look at as history that happened. And I thought I'm glad they did that. They didn't like come in and try to just say, forget everything that happened in the past. Now, what they did do though is, of course, they added stuff. But they can get away with it because, okay, once again, it's kind of spoiler alert. The way the lore is in this new one, there's been multiple Candymen, and that sounds weird. Like, it shouldn't be plural like that, Candymen. No, there should only be one. But in this movie, they set it up so that over time there had been multiples, and I kind of get why they did it. I understand what they were touching on and where they were trying to go with it. I do get what they were trying to do, but just for the purposes of my horror fandom sensibilities, I like just having the singular titular character or whatever, just the Candyman or whatever. But because, so they added, okay, to what had already happened in the original, but they can get away with that because, the original, we were pretty much just experiencing the movie through the eyes of Helen, right? And that's just one person. So there could be all kinds of stuff going on, all kinds of knowledge that just, we just didn't know about because we were just hanging out with Helen the whole time of that movie. So you can get away with having all of this kind of extended Candyman lore universe type stuff going on, where there's been more than one over time and things like that. And on a certain level, you might even say, hey, that's a good idea actually. But in the end, well, I'll get there to my final opinion about this movie. But the whole point of what I was saying was I like that they did connect to the original in a relatively adequate way. All right, that's a positive. All right. Another positive. There's some positive things did happen with this movie. I'm realizing some of that. But another positive. So, the man, as he is, he's only visible in the mirror in this movie. So like you could be getting, you could be getting killed and getting all sliced up, but you can't see who's doing it to you. You just getting it, and then you look in the mirror, and then you can see, Candyman there. He's the one destroying you, basically. I thought that was actually a very creative thing to do, and I thought it made a lot of sense. So I thought that was very refreshing to see, because it was like, okay, you're bringing some new things to the table, and not just new things, but new effective, creative, fun things to the table regarding the franchise. So I did like that, because there's like the first time you see it, there's this moment where, we're here, there's two people kind of on the floor here, and then behind them is a wall with a mirror on it. So you're kind of looking at the two people, and then you look up at the mirror and you see there's a man in the mirror that's not in the moment, in the scene with the people, and he creeps, stuff starts to happen. And it's just, in the first time you see it, it's actually very effective and pretty eerie, pretty slick. I liked it. So I got to give them credit for that. And it made me kind of think that it was like almost like a reverse vampire situation. Because like vampires don't have a reflection, right? But traditionally, vampires don't have a reflection. And in this movie, Candyman, he only has a reflection. He doesn't have, the non-reflection presence or whatever. So it's kind of the reverse of vampires. I thought that was pretty cool. So I appreciated that. That's a positive. Any other positives? Okay, last positive before I kind of talk about some other stuff. The conversation at one point when he's really started to kind of go into his madness, he's starting to kind of fall into the mouth of madness. John Carpenter movie reference there, but he starts to fall into the mouth of madness, and he does eventually go and visit his mother, okay, played by Vanessa Williams, obviously the same character, the same lady that had the baby abducted, which Helen got back and gave back to her, that same lady from the original 92 film. He goes to see her and talks to her. The conversation that they have, I thought, was a really effective scene. You really could buy into Vanessa Williams in terms of her just kind of her dread and her belief in this legend, and you could really buy into the fact that she had history with this, and that she experienced the terror and everything way back when. So like when Anthony's about to say the name and she's like, telling him, no, don't say that name, you can really see in her eyes and her face and her mannerisms, her vocal inflections, that like she wants no parts of this to be stirred back up. And then when she finally reveals to Anthony, I guess spoiler alert again, when she finally reveals to Anthony that he was that little baby that got abducted by Candyman in the movie way back when, his reaction to that news, like all of that was very effective, at least to me. I thought it was one of the better scenes in the entire movie. So that's a positive I did want to talk about. All right, now negatives and just general observations. All right, some negatives. First off, Tony Todd. All right, now Tony Todd, he is in this movie. He makes an appearance at the end as, once again, one of the Candymen, basically, right? So he shows up, but they do the whole de-aging thing where they basically like cut out his face and paste it on another body. And it just doesn't look good. And in the moment, the only positive about the moment, because it's at the very end of the movie, he basically says stuff like, he kills somebody, and you don't really see it. It's just a very generic shrouded in darkness type kill. Just nothing, nothing remotely interesting about it. He does that, and then he goes up to this woman and tells her, to tell my story, spread my legend. Just, I'm paraphrasing, but just all that kind of stuff. Tell them about me, basically. So, and then he like dips off or whatever. And, just the only positive about the sequence is just, it's Tony Todd, the heart and soul of this character. And he deserves to kind of have some piece of this movie, right? But just, it's just a cameo. And he also does not look, what they do with him does not look good, actually. Like the scene, and they do this thing, the Candymen in this in this movie, that still sounds goofy saying that, but the Candymen in this movie, they float, right? And Candyman in the original, he would float and fly, and he did the crazy backflip gainer out the window after he killed the psychiatrist in the first one and everything, which was crazy or whatever. But like so he can do all that, right? He does all that in this movie, but when they have him float, what they do, right? So he's floating and he's just standing, he's just straight up, he's vertical, right? Floating, like that, right? These are the feet, legs, all right? But his feet, his toes are pointed towards the ground, all right? So they're like this. You see what I'm saying? Like his toes are pointed. Now you got to, if you haven't seen the movie, first off, if you haven't seen the movie, you probably shouldn't be watching this review. But I'm assuming you've seen the movie. You know what I'm talking about. You have to know what I'm talking about if you were watching. It just doesn't look right. And then I'm going to use a comparison. The movie Dark City, right? The characters, basically the villains in that movie, I forgot their names, but the kind of bald-headed, very pale, whatever, they were like aliens or whatever. They would fly in a similar fashion. They flew vertically, right? They floated and they just float. It was like they were standing straight, but in the air, right? Just flying around like that. But their feet were flat, okay? So it looked very unorthodox and eerie because it's like they're standing straight as if they're on the ground, but they're in the air just flying around, all right? That is what would have looked better if they were going to have him doing this floating vertically thing. They should have had his feet be flat, right? Flat and straight. They had his feet like this, okay? So when he would move around, they were doing this. It just didn't look right. He had these ragdoll like ankles, and he didn't look. The image didn't really display strength in like this kind of like ominous power that was really what the Tony Todd character looked like, or the Candyman character played by Tony Todd in the first movie, how that character just had this power to his presence and even just his look and everything. Even when he first appeared to Helen in '92 in the parking garage, when he calls her name and she turns around in a daze and he's standing way at the other end of the parking garage, he like has this wide, powerful stance, right? And he's like this big, tall, 6'5" type dude or whatever. He's got the big, coat with the thick fur collar and everything or whatever. And he's got this power stance going on. And it's just such a contrast to this, how they have him at the end of this new movie with his ankles, just limp noodle ankles while he's floating. It didn't look right to me. And I didn't like it. So that's a long-winded way to saying what they do with Tony Todd in this movie. I did not like it. And also too, you just can't replace, let me check my time. Okay. I'm gonna try to speed it up here. You just can't replace Tony Todd. And that's almost nobody's fault because time is undefeated and he's older and it is what it is. But you can't replace prime Tony Todd. Out of all the kind of character type actors in movies, he's one of the more like unique ones in that you just can't really. I can't think of anybody else that's like, oh, this guy's just like Tony Todd. If you don't have Tony Todd for the role, prime Tony Todd in '92, if you don't have him for the role, this guy over here is going to give you everything that Tony Todd can give you. I can't think of anybody else like that, off the top of my head. So he's one of those actors, not the biggest star, but just legendary in that you can't really replace him. So, what else? Also, all of the violence in this movie is very underwhelming. There's a lot of it, but it's just underwhelming. A lot of it is just kind of by the numbers type stuff. No standout type kills. The original had at least a few kind of just standout moments of violence, memorable sequences and moments of violence. This movie, there is a lot of technically blood and killing, but it's just not very different. It doesn't stand out at all. It's just, like I said, very by the numbers. A lot of stuff gets shrouded. There's a few moments of violence where they do just outright show you stuff. And I'm not saying horror movies have to have this gruesome gore type thing, but there does have to be something there. If the threat of violence is present, right? When it takes place, there has to be something that makes its occurrence effective, even if you don't show it. There's a lot of movies where the violence won't be shown straight out right in your face in the camera, but when it occurs, you feel it. You have some sort of reaction to it. You know what I mean? And you don't get that here for me with this movie. There's only one kill that really, where I was like, oh, that was kind of a cool thing that they did, like how they showed it, how they shot it. It was the camera's panning away from a kind of high-rise apartment, and this lady that Anthony just had a meeting with, and he just left, and she had said the name 5 times, and so the camera's panning away from the apartment window. And she's really small in the image because you're far away from the apartment, and then you just see her. She's kind of moving around in her apartment, and then you just see her get snatched up in the air by an invisible force, and then she gets slammed against the sliding glass door window, and then she gets dragged across the window, and you see this long streak of red blood across the glass window before she gets thrown down, and then of course just killed or whatever. But just the way they shot it, I thought was actually, I was like, okay, that was actually pretty impressive the way they did that. I don't know if I've seen a horror movie kill take place like that, with that kind of viewpoint on it. And I actually had to rewind the movie because like my girl didn't even realize it had happened. She was like looking at the screen and everything and just didn't see it because it happened in such an unorthodox fashion the way it was shown. I bet there's a lot of people that saw the movie and didn't see that kill happened the first time or whatever. So there was one impressive kill, but other than that, just nothing really impressive or memorable about the violence. I want to give a comparison between the 92 original, a scene from the 92 original and a scene from this new one, to kind of give you a compare and contrast concerning the effectiveness of what's happening in these two movies. So the scene in this 2021 version where it's like 5 or 6 high school girls in a bathroom, and they're about to say the name 5 times, right? They say the name 5 times and they end up getting slaughtered, right? And you never actually see who's doing it. Of course we know who, but you never actually see who's doing it, and you never actually really see the results of what happened. The most gore you see is you do see like the drippage of blood, right? But it's concealed where the blood, what's happening, where the blood is coming from. Everything that happens is out of viewpoint of the camera, right? So once again, just very by the numbers, generic, make violence happen, but you don't actually see it. Find a creative way to make it so you don't actually see gruesome things happening. Okay, compare that scene with those high school girls in that bathroom to the scene in the 92 film where the young boy is talking to Helen, and he's just telling Helen the story about when a young boy went into this public bathroom and Candyman castrated him, allegedly, in that bathroom. And this young boy is just telling the story to Helen. That's all. It's not even a full scene of it happening. This young boy is just reciting the story to Helen. That simple telling of a story is 10 times more effective than the whole scene of these 5 students getting slaughtered in this high school bathroom. So that's just, to me, that kind of simple example really shows just the difference in effectiveness that the two films have in terms of just telling a horror story. You know what I'm saying? So yeah, that's just something I wanted to point out, that comparison. And if you've seen both movies, I feel like you understand the difference between those two scenes, and I'd guess most of you that have seen both movies would probably agree that the 92, him telling that story was more effective than just the whole scene from the 2021 film that took place in the high school bathroom. Just in general, this movie felt like the filmmaker, and it sounds weird to say because Jordan Peele is behind this movie, right? So this is a weird statement to even say, considering that, but it felt like the filmmakers behind this movie didn't really have any experience making a horror movie. And I know that sounds ridiculous, all things considered, but that's just the way it felt. There's just times when it felt like the wrong camera angle was being used. There was just some of the setups for things didn't make sense. The way some of the violence occurred didn't make sense. The way so much of the violence wasn't even shown. The fact that there weren't any truly memorable, creative kills or anything like that. I mean, you would think that they would really kind of, bring the pain, no pun intended, or maybe pun intended, but you would really think that they would kind of bring the pain for a film like this, bringing this, iconic character back, and you would think they would do it bigger than what they did, and just so it just kind of it just felt like they didn't really have a lot of experience with making a horror movie, or at least making, putting what people would want to see out of this film and things like that. So there were a lot of things that they did a good job on in terms of ideas, but there was a lot of places where they kind of dropped the ball and just didn't. In some places where they fumbled and never even picked up the ball in the first place. Now, this is the last thing that I'm going to touch on as far as negatives, I believe. And for some, they might not even really be considered a negative. This is actually not even, I won't even put this in the negative. Let's just put this in the observation category. These are an observation. The first film dealt with social issues as well, right? Because coming into this, I started to hear things like they went woke with this movie, and that's what people were saying verbatim, that they went woke or whatever. And when people say that about a film, I think a lot of us have a general idea of what that means in terms of what you could expect to be going on in the movie, or what to be talked about, or what to be said, or whatever. But so when I heard that, I was like, okay, well, that could the person, the people that are saying they went woke, they could just be over exaggerating, or maybe they're really, really right, and it is like this thing where there's some, it's all kind of agenda based, or whatever the case may be. So I didn't know what to expect, but I was like, that's when I started to really get skeptical beyond any skepticism I had already had, was when people started saying that they quote unquote went woke or whatever. And there is a lot of social issue conversation points, right, in this movie, okay? But I wanted to say, so the original 92 film also had a social issue story to it, a social issue backdrop to it. But they attacked everything with a lot of dexterity and finesse, in a way where the horror and the topic of the social issues were able to live together harmoniously within the film, and there wasn't any kind of, I'm trying to watch a horror movie, but you got all this political messaging thrown in. I just wanted to watch a horror movie. It wasn't, or this is all, you're just focusing on exploitative horror, and you're not really talking about the problems that are really existing in society. You're not talking about them enough. You didn't have that with that original. That original somehow harmoniously married all of that without feeling like it was trying to do anything. The original just was, and they did, they were trying to talk about, they were trying to touch on stuff and talk about things in the original, but the way they executed it is what I'm talking about. Not their intent, but just the way it came across and the way they executed it. Talking about the original, it just was, right? And this new one, this 2021 one is trying very hard. And that's kind of the difference. I'm not going to say what they, because to me, the social issue discussions and the social issue topics, everything that's kind of brought up in this movie, and kind of some of the themes, there's some really serious type themes and just some heavy stuff going on here, right? My point being is there is a lot of that here, right? But that's not, to me, where they drop the ball is what they do with the horror. Because I think you can get all of that stuff in the film and satisfy what people want to hear, what they want to hear talked about or whatever, or don't want to hear talked about or whatever. You can satisfy all that if you execute the horror aspects and the story aspects in an effective way, right? And that's where this movie dropped the ball, is really with the horror. The horror and some of the choices they made in terms of what they chose to do with the lore, and just the fact that they have nobody, modern day that's, that we know of. I mean, obviously there's always a new star to be discovered. We haven't seen everybody in the world, but right now there's nobody that can really replace prime Tony Todd's presence in that position. And so the film suffers from that in a way, especially if you were a fan of the original Candyman. That's the thing. If you never saw the originals, I could see younger folks loving this one and having never seen the original one, seeing this one first, right, and loving it, and then seeing the original finally and feeling like the original was trash. I could see that actually happening, because sometimes that's the way it works. It's whatever you were kind of raised with. Whatever you grew up with is often kind of the thing that you felt was the best. So I could see younger folks thinking this 2021 version is better. But for me, it's just that's, okay, so I'm gonna get out of here. I'm gonna leave you with my verdict. This movie is worth a watch for all fans of the Candyman movies, particularly obviously the original. This movie's worth a watch, and I would recommend that all fans of the original Candyman check this out, even though I don't think it's anywhere in the same league as the original Candyman. I do think it's worth a watch just for interest purposes. To me, it's interesting to see what they chose to do and where they chose to go with the lore. And I've always been intrigued by people's artists' interpretation of popular IPs. So, a lot of times somebody might not do what you would like them to do with a particular character or a particular IP, but to me, it's always interesting to see people's interpretations, especially when we have something that's flawless already in existence. Since the 92 film exists and is as good as it is, it's kind of like, okay, we have that, and that will always be there. You can't really take that away. So everything that happens now, let people experiment. They're gonna see what they can do, and obviously you would like somebody to do the Candyman movie or movies right, but like I said, if you don't have prime Tony Todd, it's almost impossible to do them right anyways. You have to do something different in a way, because you don't have prime Tony Todd, you know what I mean? And you also don't have just a lot of the other kind of pieces of the things that made the original so great. So long review. This, I haven't done a half-hour review. I feel like this is a half hour. I haven't done a half-hour review in a long time. So that's it, you guys. I recommend this movie. I'm not doing scores anymore, as I keep kind of reiterating. I'm not doing scores anymore. If I was doing scores, I'd probably be somewhere in the, I'd actually probably be somewhere in the 6 range, maybe, for this. Part of that is because I'm very biased, because the first Candyman, the original, is a very just overall just good film. That's a flawless film, really. That's a flawless film. If you want to talk about anything you could say negative about that first Candyman, is all personal taste type stuff. It's all like, I know there's I've seen folks say stuff about like you know, they didn't like the movie because it's just this black man you know, really pining for a white woman, and they had that kind of issue with it and all. But I mean, the backstory, the way the dude died, it would make sense that in his haunting activities he'd have an affinity for, you know, Helen or whatever. But so it makes sense, you know, you gotta, it's a movie, you know what I mean? But yeah, that's it, you guys. Candyman, check it out, you know. But the original 1992 is still the best film, one of the best horror films of all time, in my opinion. So it's, you know, it's better than this one, but this is worth the watch. You know, credit to the people involved, I guess, because, you know, they did what they had to do, or did what they thought they had to do, and they did do some good things. They had good moments, but ultimately I don't know if I would call this, I wouldn't call it a bad movie, actually, but it's just not as good as the first one. And if you really liked the first one, if you really like the first one, I don't know. I'm not gonna say that. I won't go there. Check it out. That's it, you guys. As always, I will catch you on the next go round. All right.